Start recording. Okay, well, you have all the fundamental things you need, and now it's a matter of taking them from like, what the heck just happened over the last 3 days, and just like bringing them together and using them and getting comfortable with them. So today, we're gonna tie it all together. Today we're gonna do, just like we did DOM, kind of CRUD, we're gonna do like a full web app. We're gonna make the whole thing come to life, and we're gonna start to use fetch, using all the tools that we know, using DOM manipulation and event handling, full fetch CRUD. So we're going to take our app that we've been working on, and we're going to build the rest of it out so that our features that we have persist to the database. We're going to like tie everything we've been learning together. So we'll do probably the C and the R, or maybe the R and the U. We'll see what happens. We'll do some of this today in the morning, and then we'll do the rest of it, finish out CRUD in the afternoon. But that's what we'll be doing today. And then we'll just practice until you feel confident and comfortable with these tools. So by the end of today, you should be able to explain what a SPA is, build out a full CRUD app using fetch. This will be over the course of this morning and the afternoon. Manipulate the DOM in conjunction with our CRUD fetch calls, and we'll get to explaining what the heck optimistic versus pessimistic rendering is. And if we have time, we'll spend more time refactoring our code. If not, we'll do it at another time. And we might even do some more debugging stuff. We will see. And one thing I would just encourage you as I go through these lectures, I want to give you like the building blocks. So these are like the fundamental things, and then feel free to expand on them. But like these lectures are like to help kind of introduce, and like you've been doing labs and things like that, but to introduce like these core concepts and the basic parts of them, and then you can expand on them as you go. So our app so far, let me not make this extremely large. Okay, our app so far, we have all the things that we've been working on, right? And what we did last time is the ability to save all of my data about my compliments. Is where we built our Rails API. And then the ability to use my saved data to create all of my compliments. So that's what we've done so far. So if we remember, and this one's kind of almost done. There's a couple things we didn't do on it. So let's just review this part. So this is our uncomfortable Nicolas Cage website, and these images will load in a second. But there we go. Right now, this is kind of what we have. What? How do we know? Is this talking to a server right now? I just picked up where we left off yesterday. Is this talking, like communicating with our server and getting our information from our server? Do we remember? Yeah. How could we like? If we didn't know that, if we didn't have access to this code, if we just went to this website, how would we know that this is talking to it, like using fetch to talk to like a backend? Do we have any tools that we would know right now? Go ahead.
Is there using the network for the sources code?
Yeah, let's use the network tab. This is a great source of truth to be like, so remember the network tab, it has like, all of the things. We started with saying, hey, get the HTML page, or like the index.html, and that gets to CSS and the JavaScript. And but we can sort and filter just the fetch requests and be like, oh yeah. Here, let me close this. You can say, oh yeah, we're making a fetch, right? And oh yeah, we're making it to localhost 3000 compliments. So if I click this, and paste. Oh yeah, okay. It's this thing. And it worked. It's a GET request. The response was this giant string, and it looks like an array of objects. Cool, okay. So looks like this is what we're using. Let's see, I bet you make baby smile. I bet you make baby smile. Awesome. Couple of things just to know that might trip you up. If I refresh and I open this again, and I go look for fetch requests, nothing's there. You're like, what? So you have to have the developer tools open in order to see the fetch request. You have to have it open first, or it'll throw you off. So just general rule of thumb when you're debugging, open developer tools, then refresh the page, and then start to do your debugging process and checking things out. Okay, so we know that. And you said you could see it in the source code, right? So what would be an easy way to know where this fetch is being called? Any guesses? Go ahead.
Where it says initiator?
Yeah, where it says initiator. This is a really cool tool to know just for debugging. You're like, oh, initiator, like this thing. Who like called me? Who did this? Oh, it's fetch from index.js line 22. And you can even click on that. Let's try that again. There we go. And it takes you right to the line where fetch is being called. Really helpful for debugging, just to understand what's going on. So I just wanted to, I'll just like keep calling out little tools to help you kind of on your journey of problem solving, because there'll be lots of bugs all the time, and these are going to be ways to solve them. Okay, so that's great. So we know that this is working. Also, yeah, so I have my Rails app running right here. All right, it looks just like a normal Rails server. If I close it right now the server shut off. Right, if I go to localhost 3000 compliments, it's like, no, broken. Now if I refresh, still tried to make the fetch request, but it said failed. And so this is what an error looks like in network tab. So you can see there's nothing here, can't do anything. I can still make stuff because it's not talking to the server, but right now the thing that I was trying to get, like all the compliments from the server, my server's not working. You can see, oh, it's here, didn't work. Cool, so this is just a way to like check out errors. All right, so let's turn my server back on. And let's do some stuff. Refresh. Okay, so a couple things. One, let's go back into this and let's see the first thing. It says, I bet you make baby smile. Right now, it says hugged 0 times, right? And we have a hug count of 2 on this. So let's look at the next one. Our time together is like a nap. It never lasts long enough. We have a hug count of 0. And this has a hug count of 42. So right now, like we're not actually representing all the information we need to on our front end. So we need to make some changes to what our original template was. What our original template was just like a list of compliments, but we have more information coming back from our server now. So we need to show that and display that. Does that make sense? So let's do a little bit of refactoring. And again, why we're doing this, we're solving this problem. The ability to use my saved data to create all my compliments from. It's not fully accurate yet. Right now, we have all the complement names, but we don't actually have the hug counts that are coming back from the server. So let's go back to our code. And let's see what's going on. Well, why is that? Well, when we create a compliment card, this is where we're doing that. We're just passing in the complement right here, and we're hard coding hugged to 0. So every time we make a new card, it's just always 0. And we don't want that. Does anyone have any thoughts? Again, and we're getting back here from compliments. We're going through, looping through all of our compliments from our endpoint, from our API. And we're saying for each compliment, add it to our UL tag, and just pass in the message. Does anyone have any ideas on how we can change this code to make the data that's coming back from the server show the hug count as well as the message on our HTML? Go ahead. Yeah. So walk me through. What should I do?
Wait, it was up there, right?
Yep.
So on line 14, you should take the zeros out.
Awesome. And what do I put in here?
I don't know what we have for maybe it's compliments dot. I don't know what we have as our attributes.
Cool. You're saying compliments dot count?
Yeah, I guess. I think it's hug count again. I don't know what the.
Yeah. So let's check it out. How would we debug this? So let's just write this first and see what happens.
We need the backticks.
Oh, so this is actually all in a backtick. This is actually, it's a little confusing when you look at it like this, but what this is doing, this is actually all one line. This is one giant backtick. But with backticks, you can actually indent and like you can make it look like a template that's easy to read. That's why I'm doing it like that. But it's technically all one giant line. Yep. It's like way more. I know actually what's going on now when I like indent it and like make new lines on it. But it's all just one string. Let's see. Refresh. Oh, broken. Well, that's cool. We're just gonna have a conversation with our browser. Compliments is not defined. Okay, where's that? Ah, right here. Compliments is not defined. And okay, yeah. So let's just put again. You can put a breakpoint like right here, like somewhere, and just like check it out. So if I refresh again, it'll pause the code. You can press escape. This is what we have right now coming in. Complement. From here. Cool. Let's keep playing. Yeah, so let's try complement. I'll move the breakpoints. Hugged undefined times. Hugged not a number of times. Yeah. And if we look at our HTML, we've got hugged not a number and hugged not a number. And on the one I haven't touched, we have hugged undefined and hugged undefined. Go ahead.
So I think we need to make a variable for hug count and do a fetch for it. And we could pass it in as an attribute of the create complement card.
Like here?
Yeah, it's pass it in as a parameter.
Okay.
And that way we could put that in when we interpolate.
Like here?
Yeah, we would still need to make we would have to define it before we could pass it through.
Where's that?
We haven't defined it, so we would have to do a fetch for the hug count.
So yeah, let's see what we get back right here. So I'm just gonna put a debugger. This is where we're using this method. I'm just gonna put a debugger right here. Okay, so here's where we pause the code. We are going to this site, right? Going to our API. This is our information we get back. So this is all of our compliments. Then, when that happens, then we take that string, turn it into JavaScript, and then we get our compliments back. And our compliments is an array of objects. It's the same thing as this, just now in JavaScript. Cool? So now, compliments. So let's look at the first complement. It's an object. What do we have in it?
We could do
We have if it's favorited or not. We have how many times it's been hugged. We've got what the compliment's message was, like what the actual compliment was. So we can do things like compliments. Let's check out the message, right? Let's check out is it favorited? Nope. What's its hug count? How many people have hugged this thing? 2. Cool. So we have this information coming back to us right here in this response after we parse the JSON. And we're looping through our compliments. We're saying for each compliment, add another compliment card HTML. And right now we're just passing in the compliments message. But we have all these goodies. We have all the information we need already right here. Go ahead.
So after compliment message, like like, would I be able to put a comma and then maybe do a complement hug count?
Yeah.
And then pass it in our template.
Where do I have complement? D. That's where, okay. Complement. I was like, this spelling is driving me crazy. There we go. Okay. So back to here. So you're saying complement dot, what is hug count? Like, how do I know what the key is that I need to add?
Check that out in the debugger.
Exactly.
It's hug count though.
Yeah, you're right. And it's hug underscore count, right? Like that's, if I looked at the, just to show you, it's like, yo, this got parsed into JavaScript. Here's my object, hug underscore count. That comes from our server. The key's here, hug underscore count, created underscore add. Make sense? Cool, awesome. Cool, let's try it. So now we are taking this thing and we're passing in complement.message, complement.hug count. And we're up here, complement and hug count. And we're using complement here, and hug count and hug count. Let me remove the debugger if I have one. Yep. Cool. Hugged 2 times. Hugged 42 times. Hugged 3 times. Hugged 64 times. Hugged 2 times. Right? We're getting our information and we're actually displaying what we need now from our server. Go ahead.
When we were doing this before, it showed hug 0 times. Is it because every time we refreshed, it went back to the piece of code where instead of where we had a hug time, we had 0 times? Is that why?
Yeah, so what was happening is we're going through each of our complements and we're calling this function to create an LI template that we add in to our UL. So for each of the complements, we're making a card, like an LI, for each of them, so we can show it on the DOM. And in this card, we were hard coding 0. And so we were like, every time we create one, I'm not gonna look at the information I got back from the server, it's all 0. And now we're like, no, there's more information we want to display to the user, like accurately what's coming back from the server. And that's the hug count. Cool. Yep, there we go. Something else, I want to optimize this. What if we wanted to use other keys? Like what if I wanted to use, if it's favorited or not, right? I could do this, but actually for me, an easier way is I'm just actually going to pass in the complement object, the whole complement object. And instead of like saying like I'm passing in the message and I'm passing in the hug count, I'm actually just going to pass in the whole complement, right? The whole complement object. And I'm going to call message here. And I'm going to call hug count here. So let's see what we just did. I'm going to put debugger right here. Debugger. So now, for each of these complements, we're calling this function, create complement card. So I'm inside of it. It was just called. It got called from right here, create complement card, passing in the whole complement. And now we have that whole object. So if I look at complement object, we have the whole object inside of our function. And I can just call the different keys right in our template. So I can say complement object dot message, boom, right here. So now we have the message. I can say complement object dot hug count, right, there it is, there it is. And now I just called it complement object, so you see that's what I'm passing in. But for me, I'm just gonna call it complement. It makes more sense to me. So I'm gonna rename complement object. It's just, we're passing in the whole complement object. So complement.message, complement.hugCount, complement.hugCount. Let's test it. Let me make sure I remove my debugger. Okay, still works. Everything works. Great. Cool. So now we have a little bit better representation of actually what's coming back from our server, and we're actually displaying it properly in our template. Any questions on that? Go ahead.
Can you just scroll back down? I want to see the code where you put the complement.
Right here?
Where you fetch.
Yeah. So this is taking from this link, this API, it's getting the response, which is a string, turning it into JavaScript. Then we have access to this array of objects. Each one is our complement object. Go for each of them, take that object, and we have our UL tag already, and we just concatenate what's already inside of our UL tag with a new LI, and just pass in the whole complement object. And we use it right here, complement.message, complement.count. Yep. Awesome. Okay, so that is this part right here. So we've got basically our data like accurately represented now. I'm going to worry about favorites at the end again, but for now, let's go. And I actually want to update my hug count and have it saved to my database. So that's the next feature. So right now we've got the front end kind of where we want it, but it's not persisting the data. We do have talking to our database, like we are polling what's in our database right now. And so cool things could happen. So for example, if I refresh, this one's hugged 2 times, right? Let's see what this one is. Let's see. Compliments. This is, I bet you make baby smile, right? There it is. I bet you make baby smile. And it's hug count 2. So ID 47, right? That's what this is. So right now this is just a Rails app on the back end. Like this thing is just a Rails app. So I can say compliments 42. Here it is. I bet you make a baby smile. Let's do something. We'll open a new tab. So I'm in my Rails app. See, looks like a Rails app. Rails console. Here's all my compliments. Let's find 47. Right, there it is. Let's look at its hug count. It's 2. Right, same thing. If I update hug count to be 80 in my server, now it's 80. I go back, look at my API, it's 80. Remember, it's I bet you make baby smile. If I it didn't update here yet, but if I refresh, do you think it's gonna be 2? Do you think it's gonna be 80? What do you think? Who thinks 80? Who thinks 2? Cool. Refresh. One weird thing that happens in these APIs, it just went away. You're like, where did my thing go? When you update something, unless you do some specific sorting, it just goes to the very bottom every time you update it. So I bet you make baby smile is now 80. Right? This is really cool. So say some other people on the site, just like somebody was just adding likes to the database, which is what we just did, and now it represents here. So like this is accurately representing what's going on and on the server, which is great. But if I do this, if I say like it, or hug it, hug it, boom, 81, 82, 83, 84. And if I refresh, or if I look at the server, do we think it'll be, how many people think it'll be 84? All right, and how many people think it'll be 80? Okay, so refresh, 80. And if I go here, 80. So here's why that's happening. All we've done so far is do the R of CRUD. We just did like give me all the compliments. So if we look at RESTful stuff, RESTular compliments. Cool. So all we've done right now is this, get compliments. Display a list of all the compliments. All we're doing is just doing a get request, right? So we're just listing all of our compliments. That's all we've done so far. What I want to do now is I want to update our hug count. So I want, right now the front end is accurately like showing, like when I click like it, it's just liking it properly. But it's not sending anything to our back end. We're not doing any fetch requests to update this current compliments hug count. So, again, tying everything together. You know REST. Now you're learning and you're getting to know fetch and how all this fun front-end stuff works. If I asked you, if you wanted to update something in Rails, how would you do that? Like if this was Rails, how would you update the hug count? Anyone want to take a guess or walk me through that? Go ahead.
So the method we should do a post method.
A post?
Because we're trying to update or patch something.
Yeah, so we want to do a different method than a get, right? So when you do an update, what is the method? Go ahead.
Wouldn't that button have to be like a form almost, and then you would, like the edit would be like just the button, and then the update would be you hit the button and it sends a patch request to the update, what is it called, method in the controller.
Yes.
And then it updates.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So if we look here, right, you're saying before, you're like in Rails world with this, you say, I want to go to like compliments ID edit. You would get this form. That's what you're talking about. You'd maybe say my hugs are now 80, and then you press submit, and then that sends a put request or patch request, that verb, to compliments ID, and the purpose of that is to update a specific complement. That's what you would do in Rails, right? So on the front end, anytime we're looking at something that says return an HTML form, we kill that. We don't need that anymore. We're going to do that a different way. Okay? But everything else, so there's only two that we're going to kill. Compliments ID / edit, no longer a thing. See, HTML, then when it says HTML, compliments new. Right? We didn't use like a new form and made a new request. We didn't make a GET request of this. When we made new compliments already, we have this little form right here. When I make a new complement, we have that. I'll show you how to tie that together with fetch. But back to update. So we don't do this part, but we will be doing this. So this is how we will talk to our database and say, given a specific complement ID, complement / ID, I want to update something on it, right? So on an update, what are the two things that you need? Like, what are the two main things that you need when you're updating something in a database? Go ahead.
Like the idea of what you're updating, and then like what you're actually updating.
Exactly. Yeah. You need to know, like if I have like $100 and I'm going to give it to someone, I need to know like, hey, you're the person, and here's the $100, right? Like those are the two parts you need when you're updating someone or updating something. Cool. Perfect. So like you said, we have part of it here in the path, compliments / ID, so the ID of the complement, and then the rest of the information that you need to update. So let's do it, because right now,
So question, the compliments that you're fetching the first time, that's the file station is DB, right? That's your DB.
I'm actually just making a GET request like I normally would, and it's just an API, like you would normally use an API.
So it's not a database.
It is. It's coming from a database. Like here, it's just Rails. It looks like it's complement.all. This information is the same as what's coming back when I do compliments. It's the same information. Yep.
So, but I mean, like, the
It's-
question is, what's the file extension? Like, how do I know that that's my database? Like, I know that it's coming from a fetch that I'm doing myself from
Yep.
my local host.
Yep.
but how do I know that it's connected to my database?
Yep. So for now, what we'll do is just, you're going to use this API. On Friday of next week, I'm going to give an in-depth lecture on how to build this yourself. Yeah, good question. So here's what we have now. So we know our RESTful conventions, and we know that we want to make an update, right? And let's just keep playing with this one. I bet you make baby smile. I want to change it, but instead of changing it from our back end, like we went in here and like did this update, right? We did like update hug count 80 right here. I want to do it using fetch, and I want to do it using REST. So if you had a guess, the two things that we need, right, are the data and the path, right? Like the thing we're updating. So fetch localhost 3000 compliments. What would I have to add here to make a patch or a put? Go ahead.
The ID of the complement or the card.
Yeah, I want to update this one, right? So I'm like, okay, cool. Copy this. Compliments 47. Right, this is the one I want to update. So by default, fetch just makes get requests. But fetch has two arguments. First one is the URL that you're going to fetch from. The second one, it's an object. We'll call it a configuration object. This is how you start to tell fetch more advanced things. So I'm going to make a new line, and I'm just going to add keys to this object. So method, patch. Cool. So this is the HTTP verb that you want to use instead of get. Headers. This is like information about the request that you're sending, okay? So in this case, these are a little funky to think about at first, but this is like you're sending this information to this server, to this database, to this API, and you're saying, hey, I want to let you know it's a RESTful convention, so I want to update this complement. That's what this is for. This part's saying, just so you know, I'm going to send you JSON. Cool? And I'm expecting that you give me back JSON. Thanks, server. That's what you're saying. Final thing is the body. Go ahead.
How come content types in brackets or acceptism?
Yeah, great question. So you can write it either way. I wrote it both ways so you can see it. The reason this one's in a string, this is just a nested object. So this is an object here, and this is a nested object. It's a key that points to another object. Content type is just the key name, and you can make a string a key, and I just need it for that dash because I can't do dashes. If I did this, oops, if I did this, it would break. Yeah. So I'll make both strings though, just so we can be consistent. I just want to show you, you'll see both. Cool. Finally, you need the body. And the body says, like, what are you updating, right? Like, who am I giving this $100 to? So that would be, what are we updating? Anyone? hug count, right? And we need to send it same way the server expects it. So for here, server saying hug count looks like this. So we're going to say hug count. What do we want our hug count to be? Go ahead. Question? Yeah.
Oh wait, I was gonna answer. What you want?
Sure. What do you want the hug count to be? Let's do it.
Like the current hug count now plus. Oh no, I'm thinking it's what.
You can just type 7. It's 3. We're just gonna do 3. Hug count 3. It was 80, right? Compliments 47 was 80. I'm just gonna like override it and be like, nah, someone cheated. They added too many hugs, getting bumped down to 3. Cool. So let's run this code, okay? Well, it tried to. Look, it made a patch request to localhost 3000, compliments 47, right? This is very similar. So by the way, the difference between put and patch, basically the same thing. They're just for updating. Patch just says I'm updating like a couple attributes on an object, and put says I'm just updating literally everything on the object. But as the semantic difference, they're literally the same thing. That's just how they're used differently. Go ahead.
So if we were to use put in the body part, you have to put every attribute, right? Or can you only?
No, you can. It would work either way the same. Okay. It's just like the semantic difference between using them, but they work the same. Yeah. Go ahead.
Sir, the way you type the method like patch, it's case sensitive, or you can just put it like lowercase.
It works the same way. Yeah, so if we look network. Oh, actually, nope. Yeah. I think it is, let me fix the first error and then we'll look at that. Cool. So I think it is case sensitive. We will look though. Okay, so if I refresh, let's just go back to what we had here. Okay, so we're close. We made a patch request. It says compliments 47, bad request. Okay, well this has been terrifying in the past when we look at errors, but it doesn't have to be. So we just click check out, this was the problem. But if we go to the network tab, this is where we're going to get the most information when we're messing with fetch. So here, I can say, oh, it's red, right? You saw that other red one when I turn the server off. You can click here and check this out. This will give us all sorts of great info. Action dispatch, HTTP parameters, parse error, 419, unexpected token at object. You're like, what the heck is object? So in our APIs, you can actually, when you're messing with Rails APIs, it'll actually give you, they're called like the error stack, or there's different words for it, but like this is a stack trace, but it's basically all the errors that exist when something breaks. So it shows you that, but here's like the main one, right? This is the error. That's awesome. I can actually check my server here. I also got an error, right? Started patch, so it started to work. And then it was like, yo, what the heck is object? And just like gave me the same error, right? This is the error we got from the front end. This is from our server. Parse error, unexpected token, object. All right? So there's one more part when we do any giving information back to our server. So if we look at the headers, here's how to read this. Request URL, compliments 47, it's just rest. The method, we used patch this time. Status, didn't work. Request headers, so there's something called response headers. Don't worry about that right now. This is what we get back from the server. This is what we send the server. So here's what we sent it, right? Accept application JSON. We gave that to the server, said, hey, we're expecting you to give me JSON back. And this one's saying, yo, FYI server, I'm sending you JSON. If you don't have that, it will be like, I don't know what you just sent me. Like, no, I'm sending you JSON. Get ready for it. And then this is weird, right? So here's the two things that we're supposed to give when we update. The ID, and this part is supposed to be the information that we're supposed to update. But right now we're giving back this weird bracket object thing. So let me show you where that comes from. Oops. Yeah, it should be right here. Okay. So this is a hug count, right? We would expect that we're sending this hug count. But what's actually happening right? Hug count object, there it is. What happens when a server, or what happens when fetch sends something to a server is there's a translation process, and you'll see what I mean in a second. So what it actually sends is something like this. This is what our fetch sends to our server. See, sending this weird partial string of object-object. So how the internet works, strings in, strings out. Remember, when we are, just going back here, when this information here, this information here, this comes to us via JSON. JSON is a string, right? If we look and we go back to our code, there's this translation step, right? We say, from Ruby, which is what our backend is in, from Ruby, give me all the compliments in the database in JSON, which is just a string. I get the response, which is my string. I turn it into JavaScript, and I can use it in JavaScript. Now it's an object or an array of objects. Great. Same is true when you send stuff back to a server. Anytime you're using JSON, so like, so this world is my Ruby world, right? This is my server, this is my Ruby world. All my coding I do in Ruby. This world is my JavaScript world. All the coding I do is in JavaScript. When I'm asking, be like, yo, give me some stuff, I communicate through HTTP, but when I send data and information, it's all JSON, which is equals to a string. This is the string. And when I get information back, it's also through HTTP, but if I have data, it comes back through JSON, right, which is a string. And here's why. I could write on my backend in Ruby, or a Python, or Java, or Go, or whatever, some backend language, doesn't matter. I always just turn it into JSON, right? So I send it through this one data format, and then here, I can turn this string into JavaScript. And when I send the information back, doesn't matter what language, this string can turn into Ruby, or Java, or whatever. This is why we use JSON to talk back and forth. So the whole internet is just strings being sent somewhere, and then it turns into a programming language, and strings being sent somewhere, and it turns into the programming language. That's what's going on. Any questions on that? A little funky. It's really powerful, though. So here, this is what's happening. This is coming from a Ruby server. I'm saying, give me the compliments. It just gives me this JSON, which is just a string, which looks like an array of hashes in Ruby, and in JavaScript, it looks like an array of objects. That's like the difference. So it turns it into JavaScript, then I can use it. Similarly, if I want to send something to a server, I need to turn it into JSON. So here's how I do that. If I go back here, see right now it just tried to turn a JavaScript object. It was like, I don't know what to do, so it just turned it into object-object. So what we need to do is turn it into JSON. And you use JSON.stringify hug count object. Now check it out. See, it's a string, but what does it look like? In JavaScript, it looks like an object with a key hug count 3. In Ruby, it looks like a hash with a key hug count 3, right? It doesn't matter, that's the point. You're just translating data back and forth as a string. And then whatever you have on each side turns it into the language you need to use. Really cool. So we need to send it, our server, this, not this object thing. Because now, if I run the same thing I did here, this is what our fetch or send to the server. If I send it the JSON instead of the actual JavaScript object, look, perfect. Make sense? So there's one more step we need to do for this update to work properly. So I'm just going to clear all this. So knowing what we know now, what do we need to do to change this to make this work? Go ahead.
JSON.string5, which you have there in the body.
Exactly. Didn't get an error. That's cool. Go ahead.
But so why do we not need to put the rest in JSON, like the method headers and all that? Is it because only the body part is like what's actually?
Yeah, you mean why do we need to put
through the server?
Why do we need to put this?
Yeah,
Yeah, because we're sending data to the server this time. See, this body is where we send data. The other time we're just saying
get through the HTML.
yes, exactly. The other times we're just saying just give me stuff. So we don't need to say, hey, FYI server, I'm sending you this. Yeah, great question. So go ahead.
JSON is an object of JavaScript on the language?
No, it's just a string that stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So it looks like JavaScript. It also looks like a hash in Ruby. It also looks like other data structures in other languages. It's just a string that represents data that other languages can turn into, like in JavaScript, it'll turn it into JavaScript. Or in Ruby, it'll turn JSON into Ruby. Yep. So here, now if I go to the network tab, we can see if it worked. Looks like it worked, right? Patch to the right URL. Look at our request payload. It's different now, right? Hug count 3. It's got this as opposed to when it was crapping out, it just had object, right? And we can, so we have this information. We can see what if it worked, and we can look at the response, right? Oh, we got JSON back, and if we look at the preview, there it is. And check it out. Hug count was 80. Now it's 3. If I look here, it was 80, right? 47. Refresh. Now it's 3. Awesome. So we just did our update. Cool. So I'm going to go back here. All right. So that's cool. So now we have like this great information about how to update. But what if I wanted to, this is like hard coded. How do we make this dynamic? What I mean is, how do I like make it so I can use this code and say any complement and any hug count? How would I do that? You have a thought? You raise your hand. No. Okay, no worries.
We would probably want to pass in some kind of variable into the stringify, which we get from whatever we update in our, I guess, on our page.
In here?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So go ahead.
I don't know how to do it, but I know that you would need to, that 47 would need to be like the ID of whatever you're grabbing.
Yeah.
So that from 47 to whatever your ID is, and your hug count, the actual number should be changed to a variable of however many times it's been clicked. But I don't know how to do it.
Awesome. Well, I do. So let's do it. I love it. Perfect. So I get to show you guys. Perfect. So exactly what you said we're going to do. So let's do it. So I'm going to make a function, just a helper function that makes our life easy. So const, and I'm going to call this update complement help count, something like that. We can call it other things. I'm just going to start with that. Cool. It's a function. So like you said, it'll take the ID of the help, of the complement I mean, and the help count, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste that whole thing in that we did in the console. Indent that. And I'm going to take this, instead of double quotes, I'm going to put backtick so I can do string interpolation. And I'm going to say $, put the ID here, like you said, and help count. Help count. Go ahead.
Why is it called help count? Shouldn't it be hook count?
You're right. I used to work on a product that had a help count. So I think in my brain, I just put help count. So I'm sorry, it's hug count. You're totally right. Hug count. Hug count. Come on, Kevin. Variable naming, important. Thank you. Good call. So, update complement hug count. So how would we use this? Oh, do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, for those attributes for like method, header, and body, where do we find that in like the console?
This part?
Yeah.
Like, where does this, like, how do I know if it worked or not?
No, like, how do you navigate to get that in the console? Or like,
Yeah, so all you have to do is go to the network tab. And then you can see any requests that are made. Any requests have these. You can click on any request. So it looks like this initially. Click on one of the requests. Go to headers. And here, it'll show you general information about the request. This is where you see the URL. So you see the route. So this is the path and the HTTP verb, which is the route. You'll see if it worked or not. And you'll look in request headers. This is the request you send to the server. There's also response headers, which you get back from the server. Request headers, which you send, you can see, oh, accept is in there now, and content type is in there now. So for example, if I were to try this again and remove this, it actually breaks. It doesn't know what to do, right? We didn't give it the right headers. We can go back to our network. Got a red one, cool, let's check it out. See, still trying to make a patch. It's saying 404 not found. We're like, we gave it the hug count, what the heck, why is it not found? Let's look at the preview. No route matches patch complement. You're like, BS, I know it does, but we need to tell it, look for the JSON. And we didn't do that. And you can see in here, our headers are gone, right? This says content type by default, it's text plain. This is not, this is application JSON. That's why we.
That error is because you didn't give it an ID.
No. Oh, you're right. This is because we didn't give it an ID here. Let's go back. I just copied the code that we had before. Yeah, let's do 47 again. Good call. 47. Let's go back. Network. Okay, so what's happening here is this is actually just being nice and helping us, but a lot of times this will break. So in general, it will break a lot of times if you don't have those content types. Thank you twice now. You're awesome. I like it. So yeah, but normally that's what happens. Like how to see them is in that tab. And a lot of times this server, Ruby, is being very nice to us and saying, oh, we're just gonna find out, even though it said text, it's actually application JSON and it does a translation for us. But a lot of servers, which you will see when you start to practice, they will break if you don't have these. Go ahead.
All right, so my only question is, this is another way of declaring a variable using the constant keyword, because you're trying to create a function, but you're using the constant keyword.
Yep, so for arrow functions, this is how you name them.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. And one more thing, if this is confusing, just because you're like, there's a lot going on in fetch, I'll just show you one more way to write this. I'm just gonna call it this for now. This is just a config, it's an object with basically configuration about, it's like telling you what this fetch should do. That's the second argument. And the first argument, if this helps you like think about it. Right, so this is actually what's going on. Is fetch takes two arguments. The first is a URL that you're going to, and the second is a configuration object. But a lot of times it's just written the other way. Go ahead.
When you're sending or accepting JSON, is application/JSON like a keyword or something?
Yes, this is a, so you can see, you can say, what kinds of content types are there, HTTP? And you can see like, what are all the possible values for the content type header? And there's a bunch of them. So you've got MPEGs, you've got images, you've got CSVs, you've got XML, all sorts of stuff. Text JavaScript instead of application JavaScript. You've got like all sorts of things that you can send it to your server, so your server knows this is a type of information I'm sending you. Get ready. Cool, go ahead.
So in this, when you actually make the content type, it's also required to set the characters types or no? Like you say, I want to have UTF-8 or
Yeah.
it's not required?
No, some servers a lot of times now will assume things for you. For example, when I removed these, it still worked because our server is really nice and just like is like, nah, I'll figure this out for you. But here, see it, this when we're saying text plain, it just does it for you, right? It tells you that. But, cool, good stuff. All right, so let's use this function that we just made. So what we did is I just said, I'm just going to go back the other way. This is the way I will normally write it. I just wanted to show you what are the two arguments more explicitly. Cool, so we have complements ID. This ID now will be dynamic from this argument, and hug count. Hug count will be here. Cool? So what I'm going to do now, copy this, or I'm going to see this, and I'm just going to save, and I'm going to refresh my page, and we should have access to this because we just saved it in our index.js. So refresh, console, right? Update hug count. It's there, and it takes two arguments, right? ID and hug count. So let's just pick another one that we want to update. Let's just pick 64. You have really contagious laughs, and hug count, let's just make it, I don't know, 100, okay? So now, we have this really nice helper method. It was 80, let me double check what it was. It was 64, and hug count we'll make it 100, okay? Again, we're passing in hug count, just to recap, passing in hug count, second argument, it goes here. ID, which one? Enter. Let's look at our network tab. Cool, 64 to complements, patch. We have the hug count information we're sending. And it's 100. Awesome. So it looks like it's working. If I look here though, right, it didn't update. Weird, right? We did it in fetch. We talked to our server. We said it was 83. Now it's 100, but it didn't update on our DOM. Any thoughts on why that would be? Go ahead. Yeah, well, yeah, we didn't like tell our HTML anything yet. So this is like just an interesting thing to think about with fetch. So this fetch is just happening in the background right now. This fetch, it like your DOM doesn't know anything about the fact that you just did this fetch request. Your server does, right? If I look here, yep, this is 100, right? But this is a point of those .thens. You need to say, I'm going to make an update, and then when I get the response back, you know, like update the server, or update the DOM, I mean. The server gives me like, oh, it worked, update the DOM. So what we need to do now is now we have code where we're updating our database, and we have code where we can update the front end, right? But this is out of sync, right? It's 100. This says 96. they're not in sync. What we need to do is we need to sync them up now. We need to sync the DOM and our fetch request, and we need to make them one thing. So when the DOM updates, the database updates, and vice versa. Does that make sense? So there's two ways to do that. That's where optimistic and pessimistic rendering come in. I'm going to show you optimistic rendering first. So you notice, and I'll show you the difference and why they're valuable. So you notice, right now, this worked, right? This, send it to our database, we're all good, we're updated, but we didn't get any feedback on like, yo, this worked. We just have like undefined, like nothing happened, it didn't update our DOM. So what we can do is, basically we need a way for us to know that our user wants to update the help count, or the hug count. Before, we were saying, hey, in Rails, we would have a form with like edit. Here, we already have user feedback, right? This is telling us, hey, I want to update, I want the hug count to go up. This is what this is giving us. This is like our form. So knowing that, where do you think we should make our update count? Like, when should we call this so that we know, like, hey, the user wanted to add a hug? Go ahead. Yeah. Perfect, exactly. When we do this, we want it to update the DOM, and we want to update the server. We want to tie everything together. Go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question. So basically, it's when you load the page the first time, you're getting a response and you're getting the compliments in that time.
Yes.
But when you update, you're not reloading again the compliments, so it's blank.
Exactly.
So basically, what you have to do is just make another request.
Another fetch, yep, in the background.
Yeah, but I'm making a request to get the new information.
Yeah, I'll show you, exactly. So this is actually what a single page web application does. So does anyone have any like plain English words for what a single page application does or is?
It's like everything happens on one page. You never really go to different URLs, or maybe, you know, there are different things that are rendered on that one page, but you never really traverse between different URLs.
Yeah, great. I love it. Perfect. It's like if you go to Google Maps or if you go to like Google Spreadsheets, you don't like, there's not like a /edit and then you type in a cell and then it refreshes, and then you go to the next cell and it's a /edit and you type in the cell and it refreshes. Like if I go to Maps, right, and I type in like, I don't know, it's like a million WeWork. There we go. No page refresh happened, right? I can move around, I can click on this. This is literally all the things we're learning. It's just HTML, it's just JavaScript doing DOM manipulation, event handling, and fetch. If I open the console and I go to the network tab and I filter by XHR and fetch and I type in WeWork, see look, all of a sudden there's already requests being made. And I click here, look at all these requests being made in the background, right? And then it like refreshed everything. So this is Google's crazy way to like protect from hacking. So this is why this looks all nuts, but it's the same information. Just I had to do this at Amazon. Similar weird crazy crap, but some of it will still look like what we know, right? Like just a bunch of nulls and then some weird strings and stuff. But you get the idea, right? Like this is the same technology that you're learning right now. So this is what a single page web application does. This page didn't refresh, but you have all this interactivity like a normal app, and that's what we're doing now. That's what we're implementing. And like what you were saying before, it's like, I don't make a page refresh now. All I do is I click this and everything is in the know and in sync right away. Cool? So let's tie these things together. Like you said, we want to update the server, we want to sync them. So we're updating the DOM properly. We want to update the server as soon as we click the like. That's our input from the user saying, yo, increase the like by 1.
Would you actually want to refresh the server every time you click that? Like
Yeah.
you did the server? Wouldn't that cause like a lot of load on it when you click them a lot of times?
Great question. So the way that servers work now, no. Like this is how all websites work, like that are dynamic like this. I would encourage everyone to like explore these things. So go open the network tab on your favorite like website. You can see this now. You can be like, how many requests is made? Like you just saw, there's like thousands just now that were made in like Google Maps just when we were moving around and stuff. So like they're very light touch. They're like one little update here and there, and servers can handle that really well now. Yep.
So, but on the back, like what you're not seeing, they're still doing communication with the server.
All the
You
time.
don't see it.
Yep. As a user, you don't see it, but we have to. So we're gonna do one right now. Let's do it. So here we go. So right now, again, 42, 43, 44. Our time together is like a nap. If I look in the database, refresh, it's 42. It's not 45, which is what it should be because they're not in sync, right? We need to sync them up. So how do I use this method? Where's the spot where I should call this method? We already know that we want to do it when this button's clicked. Where should we do that? Someone who hasn't spoken yet. Let's take a guess. Here's what we know. We have a spot where we know the user is going to press a button. Right now, this updates. What we need to do is also update the server when this button happens, when this button gets clicked. Yeah, do it where we're updating our button, right here, right? We have an event listener. We already know the button's getting clicked. We already actually even increased the hug count. So all we need to do, like this is where we update the DOM, right here. This is where we're updating the DOM. Now all we need to do cool. So take this method right here, take this function. And call it. And what are the arguments we would give it? Yep, ID. So we'll wait for that one. And the new hug count. So we have that right here. This is the new hug count. So we know what we want to get, like we know how many hugs we want to give this thing. We know this is what we need to update. Where do we get the ID from? The object. I heard that. Yeah. Let's see. Is it in? Is it anywhere? Like I guess how do we? We're like this close. We have one piece left, which is where the heck does the ID come from? Go ahead.
We use that event.target.id or something like that.
Yeah. Great intuition. You're like event.target. Let's put a debugger in and see what happens. Refresh. We click like or hug, and we're here. And we can say event.target. So let's press escape. Event.target. Okay. .id. Nope. Event.target.parent element. Let's look around. Is there anything in here? We do have something called data-hug count, but we don't have that. We don't have an ID. Let's go up one. I'm just going to keep DOM traversing. Parent element. So now we're at the full LI. There looks like there's nothing that has an ID here that we can play with. So what we need to do is what that means is, hey, we have, like, check this out, right? Console. Actually, let's go to network and go to our compliments. We're getting back an ID, just like we got back a hug count, just like we got back favorited, just like we got back message, but then we're not doing anything with it. So what we need to do is we need to give each of our LIs, each of these templates, one more piece of information. And then it all comes together. And that is our ID. So there's a key ID. And I can just go back to my template, just like I did message, just like I did hug count. And I can say dataset-ID and bind our ID to this HTML. So now we have all the information we need to update our front end and our back end. Now it's all tied together. So data-ID. Oops. And string interpolate the complement object. And it's called ID. Right? Just to be safe, debugger, so you can see what I'm doing. Save. So now, every time I make one of these cards, it's coming back from the server, refresh, bam, I'm in this function, press escape, look at my complement, right? It's got complement.id, so we have the ID, and all I'm doing is making the string right? Having the string have the ID bound to it, 48. That's what I'm doing. A couple things. I do not care where this goes. This is just bound to whatever HTML element. So right now I did it on this button because I could, or I could say maybe I'll do it on the site tag. That's either one is easy. I don't want to have to go all the way up to my LI or something. Like I'm already in my code. Here's my thought process. In my code, I already have the site tag. I'm already grabbing from the data set the hug count on a site tag. So all I have to do now is grab the ID, and then I can use that. I can put this data set anywhere I want in this LI, but I'm just going to make it easy for me. I'm just going to put it right in the site tag. I can put it on the button, I can put it wherever I want. And I can call this anything. I'm just calling it ID because it makes sense, because this is the ID of the complement. Cool. So, let's remove the debugger. Let's just run this and see what happens. Make sure we have no more. Okay, great. Let's remove any debugger. Perfect. All right, refresh. So now, let's check out our LIs. Data ID 48, right? If I look up 48, our time together is like a now. Hug count 42. Our time together is like a now. Hug count 42, right? So we have everything tied together now. So last part, and we have everything synced up, which is freaking awesome. Final thing, let's put our debugger back in here. Debugger. Again, this is where we click the button. Refresh, click this button. Now we have our site tag, right? This site tag. So we clicked this button. Again, this is a code we wrote yesterday. This is the current button tag. We go up to the parent. We find the site tag. We get our site tag. We grab the hug count from the site tag's data set. We turn it into a number, we increase it by 1, and we add it back to the hug counts data set. If I open the console, I look at site tag, .dataset, check it out, we've got ID now too, right? So now all I have to do is dataset.id, and now we have our ID. So going back here, 2 arguments that we built into this method. Site tag .dataset.id and the new hug count. So now we know which complement we're going to update and what their new hug count is going to be. Let's test it out. Hugged 42 times. Hugged 43 times. Check here. 43 times. 44 times. 44 times. 45 times. 45 times, right? You get the idea. I could click this a bunch of times. Let's go to 50. It's all synced up back and forth. Cool, right? This is like, it's together. So, if we didn't have this ability to check this, what are some ways that we could check if this is persisting properly? Go ahead.
Check network tab.
Awesome. I love it. Yes. Go to the network tab. Press escape. Look at all these fetch requests we've made on 48, right? It was 44, right? Then we gave it 45. This was the response. But in the header, right, we're like, go to compliments 48 with a patch. Hug count is 44. Cool. It updated to 44. 45, then 46, then 47, right? And then our DOM is the same code that we had before, right? So 51, it updates in the DOM, network tab. 51, it's all synced together now. Okay. Any questions on this part?
Should you always update it in the DOM before sending it to the server?
Great question. So that's exactly what I'm going to get into now. So what we just did, this is called optimistic rendering. That strategy of exactly what you articulated, update the DOM, and just update the DOM and send the request to the server. I don't even care if it worked or not, who knows? Just why it's called optimistic rendering is like updating the DOM, right? So you're optimistically updating the DOM. You're like, I don't care if the server worked or not, I'm just gonna assume optimistically that everything's good, that everything worked, great. That's one strategy. And there's great uses for it. That's one strategy. Here's where it breaks down, right? Like you kind of have this intuition, it sounds like, of like, what happens if the server breaks? Or like, do you want to wait for like the response back? So right now what happens is like, okay, there we go. Okay, let's update this, 52, 53, right? It worked, optimistically rendered, works fine. Right, specifically what makes it optimistically rendering is we're updating the DOM and we're updating the server kind of like without them even knowing about each other. They're just like, we're just updating it and assuming that this is gonna work. What if I kill my server? My server breaks. 54. Ooh, didn't work, but it looks like it worked. 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. Right, broken. This is the issue with optimistically rendering something. Excuse me, it looks to the user like the hug count went up 5, but it's actually just broken. And if I refresh the page, first everything's broken because the server's off, but if I turn the server back on, remember it was at 60, that's what we wanted. Right, yeah, right here, this one. It's still at 53. It didn't update anymore. Like it just like stopped working because we're not checking. Like our DOM updated, but our server was broken. So we're not getting the response back from the server. We're not like waiting for the response. If we were to wait for the response, if we were to say, hey, update the server. If everything goes good, then update the DOM. That's called pessimistic rendering. We've done optimistic rendering. I'm gonna round out this lecture in the next 8 minutes, do pessimistic rendering, and then we'll get into creating, deleting after lunch. Cool? So, pessimistic rendering. Here's what we have to do for that. Instead of just updating this right away, this is where those .thens are really important that we were practicing yesterday. So right now, this is just sending to the server, and it actually never expects, like there's no way to like get feedback if it worked or not. We didn't do anything with that. So what we need to do is where we define updated complement, update complement hug count, we need to use our strategy of .then. So we make a response or a request, right? We say, give me, or I'm FYI, I'm sending you a request to update this specific complement with this information. The server will be like, cool, that worked or that didn't work. That's what the response will be. So we're going to say, grab the response, return response.json. Then see the complement we get back, or if we're not sure what this is, we can just call it parsed JSON. And let's just see what happens really quick. I'm just going to put a debugger in here. Okay. So here's what we wrote. This, right? Before, it was just like, I don't care about a response. I'm just going to send it to the server. Who cares? Now, we're like, we care about the response. We're going to take that JSON that we get back. We're going to turn it into JavaScript. And we're going to look at what happened. Cool? Save. Refresh. There we go. So, I didn't stop the DOM from updating yet, but what I did do is I said I have a response now, and I can look. Did the server work? Well, we'll know if our parsed JSON is an object. It won't have this object. It'll be like nothing or an error or something that will come back if it didn't work. So it worked, right? And we know we can look at this parsed JSON, and we can look at hug count here and be like, yes, it worked. It is 54. Cool. So we can take that response, and we can use this object that comes back from the server, and we can use that to update the DOM. So one final piece, and then you know optimistic and you know pessimistic rendering. There are different ways to wait for the server to come back with your parsed JSON. So normally we would this returns a promise, then you can call .then, that returns a promise, then you can call .then, and that returns a promise. Right? If I was really explicit, I could say this is a fetch request promise. Then this is the parsed JSON promise. Then after you get the parsed JSON promise, then you can say grab the parsed JSON and do something with it. This also is the same code. Refresh, click, same thing. Before we were just method chaining them, but each one returns a promise. So I just want to be really explicit about that so you can see that's what's happening. Right? So how to make this function even cooler so that we can just use this .then and grab our parsed information and update it. I'm going to show you a technique. Put this back, okay? And I'm going to say, instead of, there's many ways to do this. This is the way I prefer to do it. Instead of this method not returning anything, right? Remember, JavaScript, explicit return. Where's the return in here? Like on the outside? And here's the outside, right? Where's the return? There is no return. So if I call this function, and I'm just going to call it with, I'm just going to update one, 48, and I'll make the hug count 1. So 48, 1. There's no return, right? This isn't returning anything. Go ahead.
So I was gonna ask you, in that case, like where we actually have a method that is just patched, do I really need a response on my whole schema? Or I just can have just a message that said, transfer is complete, but do I actually does something else?
So right now, this is really basic information, but sometimes it might be more advanced information. Maybe you send one piece of information, which updates many things, and you might want to get that information back from the server.
But it's just the information, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So right now, this is not returning anything. This method, like right, updated complement hug count, nothing. If I were to, but it did work, right? Well, let's see. I don't know, right? 48 had hug count 55. Oh, it's in the debugger. Press play. All right, we can even see here, right? Parse JSON, did it work? It did not work. 48, 55. Go to the network tab. Oh, I think I need to just press play. There we go. There we go. Okay. So if I go back to the console, it did work. Let's go back, refresh. See, 48 and 1. But I was just stuck in the debugger. We don't know that information. We don't have any way. If I do it again, let me just remove my debugger so it's not confusing. Okay. Refresh. 48. Let's make 48. So this one, 48. Let's make it 100. Right? It doesn't return anything. We don't know if it worked or not. We have to check the network tab. Be like, okay, it worked. We sent it 100. Here it is. Awesome. Checked our server. Great. So what we need to do is that what I want to do actually is I want to use this method, and I want to say, like when this method is done, see if it worked or not. I want that kind of response. So what I can do is use these promises. I can return them. Okay? And instead of calling this final one, where we would normally update the DOM, I'm going to remove it. And so what this does is it returns fetch, which is a promise, which returns this dot then, and a promise which says dot then, grab the response, and this returns parsed JSON. So this returns our JavaScript. So this all could technically be on one line. Right? This is actually this is what it is returning. And at the end, it's returning our parsed JSON. So I'll show you what I mean. So now that I'm returning, let's see what this does. Right? All I did was write return and get rid of the other dot then. Refresh, hug count. Let's turn it to 50. Right? It's 100 right now. Turn it to 50. Cool. Now it returns a promise. On any promise, I can call it dot then. I can basically call it the code that I had before. Parse JSON. And I can say console.log parsed JSON. There we go. Now I can call this method right here, and I can say when this is done from the server, when my update is done from the server, then take the response, it's already JavaScript, and do something with it. Cool? So here's how I use this. So I'm going to do kind of similar thing, right? Just copy this. Again, all I did was add return and remove the third dot or the second dot then. I go into my code and I'm going to say, right, we already have the update complement hug count, but now we have a way to see when it's done, right? Then we can say dot then, right? When this is done, take the parse JSON, and I can actually just move all of this into the response here, into the callback. And I can say parse JSON. Let me just put a debugger in here so you can see. Hug it. Cool, so this already went through. Now we're in the response. We're saying like, okay, after we went to the server, we got our, we said, hey, we're updating, and we got the response back. We turned it into JavaScript, and now we're saying, now that that's done, then take that information, looks like it worked. Oops, shoot, sorry. Then take that information, this stuff, parsed JSON, take the hug count, right, which is now 52, and instead of calling new hug count here, we can just say site tag dot dataset dot hug count equals parse JSON dot hug count, and that's how we know for sure this is what came back from the server. So I'm going to do that. Let's say parse JSON, which is our hug count, or our complement object, dot hug count. And so let's try this. Hugged 52 times, hugged 53 times, hugged 54 times, hugged 55 times. Something broke. Looks like it's close to working.
Where's the text content? It's just number.
Ah, you're right. New hug text. This is what broke. Yep, there we go. Thank you. Let's try it again. Refresh. Hug 55 times, hug 56 times, hug 57 times. And we look at our network tab. Hug 58 times. So we're first making the request, send 58. If it works, looks like it did, right? Then it updates our DOM. It's happening really fast, 59, 59, but here's the difference. Kill my server this time. Nothing's happening on the DOM, right? We're pessimistically rendering. See, they're broken, they're not working. So it's saying, yo, you tried, didn't work, so don't update the DOM. I can click this a million times, it doesn't update. Make sense? It's a weird technique. What I'm doing here is to go over this again, and then I'll let you guys get out of here. Update complement hug count. That is returning our fetch, which we then take our response and turn into JavaScript. And this returns a promise. Whole function. So I can just say, when that's all done, then take the parse JSON, grab the key that we get back, and just use that to update. Go ahead.
How come on your update complement hug count, you've got two returns? Like, can you explain that?
Here?
You've got a return on the fetch, and then you've got a return on the response.
Great question. So they're in different scopes. So this one is this function, right? This is a function. On the outside of this function, this is what this function returns. In here, this return is what this function returns. This one, if I didn't have this return, then I would never get this parse JSON. Remember each then, whatever you return inside of the next then, you get the information. So what I mean is, if I just bring this back here, if I just brought that back to where it was, if I returned, remember yesterday when I was like, if I return like empty string or hi, this will just be like yeah, this will be just hi, right? This will just be hi. Whatever this returns, you get access to here. So what I'm doing is I'm just saying return the JSON now that it's parsed into JavaScript, return it so that the next then gets that parsed JSON. So it's a little funky, but now what's happening is I now have access to that right here. So at the end of all the, how to think about this, at the end of when all that stuff happens, which is me like updating the database, updating the server, it works. I turn the response from JSON to JavaScript. When all that's done, that's what this does. Then grab that response object, grab its hug count, and update the DOM. I'm gonna call this parse JSON complement, just because that's what it is. You get your complement back. Cool? All right, 2 questions, then let's get out of here. Anyone have any questions?
Which, sir, I just want to add something because I see what we all get confused is that you need to keep in mind that coming from Ruby, when you actually, Ruby doesn't use return. So it's returning whatever it's like the method is done.
Yep.
But JavaScript, you need to tell it to return it because it's just gonna make it the action.
Yep.
But it's not giving it back.
Yep, it'll always
That's
return.
why
Yep.
don't get confused.
I think
Yep.
where I was getting confused is when you use a
Sawtooth.
return in a for loop, any return underneath that won't ever get run. So I was like, oh, but there's 2 in the same brackets.
Yeah, yeah. They're just in different parts. Yep.
Yeah,
Awesome.
functions.
All right. Well, now you have like almost everything. We're just gonna do delete, and we're gonna do create when we get back, like after lunch, and literally, that's it. You've got this. All right. Thank you.